All right, Matt Moore, welcome to the pod. Appreciate you coming on, brother. It's been a while since we've caught up, and I think a lot has changed in both of our lives. But I want to talk with you first about what you got going on. Because last time we talked, you were more of like the fitness entrepreneur, doing a lot of coaching, and now you've shifted into Elevate, which I'll let you explain what it is.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. Yeah, it was definitely in the fitness space. I actually dropped that around March of 2023, and God just opened the door to go all in on building community, building this brand. And honestly, like with everything we got going on, that's becoming the best way to explain it is building a brand. Community is definitely our main offer with it, but we're seeing just amazing things line up. A lot of pieces of a puzzle coming together, from apparel to events to local meetups, guys internationally. So it's been cool to see just the evolution of how God has worked in my life, man.
Yeah, I saw that you had a dude from like England and maybe somewhere else too at your last meetup.
Yeah, last event brought together London, Australia, Canada, and then six Americans. So it was pretty cool to just see almost four corners of the world coming together, man.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so, what originally brought this idea on?
Yeah, I mean, I lacked community myself. Ultimately, I was 18 and I wanted to get into entrepreneurship. I just graduated high school, and there didn't seem to be many young guys who were, pursuing a healthy version of themselves in the gym, training hard, going to church, building deep relationships, like wanting to become entrepreneurs. It seemed to be few and far between. And so I lost all my friends at the time, didn't really have community around me. And I saw the need for it as I began to network with other young entrepreneurs like myself. I was like, I'm not the only one lacking this. So really built this brand to kind of send up a beacon for those types of men, men who are wanting to pursue ultimately the best version of themselves. And I think that that's every single area of life.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the main pillar of it is faith.
Yeah, I think in anything you want to do, entrepreneurship, health, whatever it is, I think faith is the foundation for it all. So I would say the foundation of it is faith, but we definitely relentlessly pursue every area. So that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And from what I've seen going on, it's really caught on, and the people that are in it love it. What do you think about it? Has just attracted so many people?
Yeah, I think the ability to connect with a community of dudes who share the same values as you and share a equally ambitious vision for what they want to achieve out of this life. And with that, when you're on the same page and you have that level of relatability on so many connection points, you build deep relationships within that. So I think the biggest part of it is community as a whole creates fulfillment in our lives, but ultimately the one-on-one connections and the relationships that are being cultivated and built. When you have 200 guys who are normalizing, this pursuit of personal excellence, you really have no choice but to start growing ultimately. So when you get immersed in that kind of culture, you start to find a better version of yourself that you maybe didn't even know it existed. And it's addicting. It really is.
And when people sign up, what is like the core offer that is part of it? Community, of course, but then like what kind comes along with that?
Yeah. So we run everything on a Discord. I think the most valuable piece that comes with that is the access to the network of nearly 200 men who share the same values. Uh, but with that, also, you get access to 3 Bible studies a week. We have now 5 coaching calls a month, and that's in every single area from finance, nutrition, training, addiction, and entrepreneurship, all from guys who are coaches in those spaces doing it themselves. So real people getting real results, teaching our community how to grow in those areas. And then beyond that, we have challenges that we do. We kick off every year, Q1 going into 75 hard. dead of the winter, a
Yeah.
time when nobody really wants to do 75 hard, but if we really say we have the vision in this life that we want to achieve, then that's being in the top 1% and, doing things that other people don't want to do. So Jan 1, kicking off 75 hard with nearly 200 guys surrounding you as you have that momentum heading into a new year. We've done things like 96-hour fasts. 1K push-ups in a day is always one of my favorites. Getting 1,000 push-ups done in a day. It's really not as bad as you think, honestly. So various challenges to just compete amongst the community. And then with that as well, we have a regions feature that we just launched. So one vision that I have is as this thing continues to scale and grow, we really want to maintain intimacy within it. We want guys to not feel like a number, 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,000 as it grows. We want them to come in and, still make one-on-one connections and feel valued as a member. So what we're doing is we're creating a ton of small groups within the community, opportunities for fathers to come in and connect with other fathers, of course, entrepreneurs, guys who just have similar hobbies or things about them in their life that they can connect with other guys with. And within that, you have location, geography that also connects us. If I have a guy who joins in Colorado Springs, Colorado, amazing. We're getting coffee, we're hitting lifts. Like that's just what we're doing. So that's something right now that we just launched this week is where guys can join and just see, who's in their region of the country. And right now, Canada will definitely go international as it continues to grow. But I want guys to be able to join from all over the world and be like, okay, there's 20 guys within a 100-mile radius of me, obviously depending on, what size city or town or where you're at. But that's definitely a vision we want to fulfill.
I'm sure as even at 200 to make each individual still feel like they're part of this, kind of close knit community can get difficult just in, as with anything with large numbers, a crowd is formed. And so trying to keep things, again, intimate, as tight knit as possible, especially online, can be difficult. How have you thought about just beyond geographic location, continuing to keep things, again, intimate? Is that more meetups? Is that more calls, kind of like you talked about, different demographic of calls, if you want to call it that? Just what is that, I guess, future vision a little bit?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is grouping based on relatability, kind of how I touched on earlier. When we have a dad join, let's say, he immediately gets immersed into our fatherhood chat and he's able to connect and go through what we have is called a connection hub. And so when you get in there, you see about 40 to 50 contact cards in there. And it's just the opportunity to book a one-on-one meeting, kind of just like this, with really 50 guys out of the community, 50 guys who have stepped up and said, I'll open up, my calendar because I love these connections that I'm making. So you go in there, get immersed in the channel, and you get the opportunity to book 5, 10, 15 one-on-one connection calls with other fathers who are, similar values, similar vision for what they want to achieve out of life. So I think that in and of itself is how we're going to maintain that intimacy. And one very unique thing, it's no surprise with the men that we're bringing together, but we have so many guys who join and say, how can I serve? How can I give back? Like, I want to benefit this community in some way. And so, honestly, Nick, it's a problem we have. It's a great problem to have that we don't even know where to put guys. We're trying to figure it out, trying to facilitate, because the best thing you can have is, men willing to serve and lead. So with that, it's going to be, empowering different leaders to step up and lead different Bible studies, different groups where the fathers can not only make one-on-one connections and chat, they can also get on their own Bible study. They can also host their own event, host their own meetup and do whatever dads want to do. I'm not a father yet, Lord willing, will be in the future. But so that's kind of the vision of how we plan on maintaining that intimacy, is just continuing to group based on relatability and empowering leaders within those small groups.
Speaking of fatherhood a little bit, congrats on the engagement. Big news. few months back now.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Then to go back to like starting this whole thing, I believe you used the word you felt called to do it. Why do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think God has given us all gifts, and I think that those gifts are to be used to serve other people, to serve what I would call the body of Christ, which is, fellow believers and other people. So I think that a gift that God has given me is the ability to connect people, build relationships, and empower. And what better way to do that than through community? It's something where growing up, I always had a vision of building a brand and bringing people together. I love shared experiences. I never want to do anything alone because I want to share, what is happening in my life with other people. It's the reason I love putting out content. It's the reason I love hosting these events, getting to go, snowboard in Utah with 10 other guys who are all in the trenches of life with me. Like it's amazing to share that with other people. So I just truly feel like with how I was raised and the vision that I just felt I had for my life to build a brand, and then combine that with the gifts that I feel God has given me to kind of pull that off. In a sense, it's too, in my mind, too divinely aligned to ignore that or not chalk it up to being a calling, if that makes sense.
100%. Have you always had a strong faith?
No. Something where I didn't grow up in church, didn't grow up with the faith. I actually have a grandpa who is a pastor. So funny enough, you think pastor as a grandpa, how did you not grow up, with faith at all? But it was something where my mom didn't really get along with my dad's parents who ran the church. So we didn't really go around much. I did get exposed at Christmas and Easter, things like that. They'd pray before meals if we ever went over there for a family dinner or whatnot. But I never got church or what it meant to follow God embodied for me or an example set. I believe the first time I really spoke to God was when I was 11 years old. My parents got divorced, and this day I found out. I get off the bus. I'm in sixth grade. I come sprinting through the grass, ready to eat that, post school snack that everybody loves. And today, I wasn't getting a snack. I was getting some very, very bad news. I stepped into my house and, I just see my brother and my mom in tears. And I get the news delivered like your dad left. And I'm just shattered, man. Like my whole life just shattered. An 11-year-old kid, like he's got this family, he looks up to his dad, and I just sat down, sat there for a second. You could hear a pin drop in this room, and I run back to my bedroom, and I just got down on my hands and knees, and I started just crying, and my cries turned into crying out to God. And again, I never got it exemplified for me. It was never something that I should have known how to do that or what that was. I truly believe it was just an innate connection to our Creator, to our Father, our Heavenly Father, that is. And started crying out, just, why, God, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my family? Just an 11-year-old kid, lost and confused with a lot of questions. And for some reason, just an overwhelming peace just came over me. I wish I could say that peace, carried throughout the struggles that ensued for the next decade and to this day. But it was something that it was definitely looking back. I just believe God just had me right where he wanted me. He knew exactly the plan for my life and knew the trajectory that moment, was going to send me on to be here today talking to you. So never really grew up with the faith, but I think that 11, that's the first time I kind of spoke to God. That doesn't mean, I'm going to church at 11 years old and got my Bible or anything like that. It just means I talked to God one time. But what had happened is I kind of knew God was real and I believed in the power of God. So growing up, I played baseball. Baseball was truly everything for me. And while the national anthem would be playing before all my games, I would always say a prayer. And I would just ask for health for my team, for the other team, and I'd ask for a win. I'd ask to perform and win. And fortunate enough, God blessed me with some abilities, and we were able to do a lot of that. But COVID actually shattered my baseball dreams. So I was dead set on Division I baseball. I was heading into my senior year of high school with Division II offers, really holding out for that Division I offer that I've been dreaming of my entire life. And right before the day before our first practice of my senior season, coach comes into the locker room and he just said, "Season's done. It's over." So another big identity hit, another felt like I was back to being 11 years old, sitting there in that room with my brother and my mom, just pin drop silence, an identity shattered in that moment because that was everything. It truly was. So, I sulked, tucked my tail for a few days. And again, for some reason, I just had this divine peace come over me that it was time to move on. Baseball was not what was in store for my life. I couldn't tell you why, but everyone thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was crazy. What are you doing? Just because you didn't get the Division I offer doesn't mean you couldn't go walk on or still make it in some way to the Division I level through maybe Division II, performing well and then moving up, whatever that looks like. And I just, nope, I'm good. Time to move on. So that left me with the question of, am I still going to even go to college? Because at this point, I'd been consuming for about 6 years from guys like Andy Frisella, Ed Milet. When my parents got divorced, my brother dove headfirst into self-development, and little bro followed suit. So we were consuming from Eric Thomas, guys like that, and in the gym together training. And so when I turned 17, graduated high school, baseball shattered. Am I going to go to college? I kind of, up until that point, just kind of thought like, oh, I think college is pretty well a scam. So entrepreneurship became my route. And I was like, I don't know what that looks like at all. But I moved out of my small town hometown in southern Indiana. That's actually where John Mellencamp is from. That song, Small Town by John Mellencamp, that's describing my hometown. And I moved up to Indianapolis, Indiana, and moved in with my brother at the time. And I got a job at a call center, answering calls from truck drivers all day, every day, 12 hours shifts. And that was just a miserable job, sitting in a cubicle. I'm basically a complaint line for truck drivers who, I mean, you get it. You're a healthy guy. Like, they live a sedentary life. Their meals come from gas stations. Like, it just doesn't make for a very happy individual living that lifestyle. So I'm just getting drugged through the mud at 17 years old. And, this whole time I got this vision. I'm telling everybody I want to be an entrepreneur. And I just felt above that call center job at the time, really. It's like, God, why am I in this job? Like, again, I believed in the power of God. I didn't really have much relationship there, but what had happened is I got exposed to a community of people that was going to church. And so I followed suit, started going to church, knew I needed to be in church, going with my brother, things like that. And slowly just kind of built up. Most people have like some sort of rock bottom moment where they came to God. That's not really my story. My story is just a slow progression of seeing God work in my life. And January 1st, 2022, as I launched Elevate, just throughout the last 2.5 years of growing that's really built my testimony as to why I put my faith in Jesus. It's just because I've honestly seen too much to go back. Like, too many perfect pieces coming together, too many men from across the world buying into this mission and wanting to represent this brand and spread it over in the UK or spread it in Ireland or whatever it is, for me to think that was my doing, honestly. So just as I've dove more into it, I've just slowly built my faith, man, just like anything else.
That's pretty crazy, though, that at a young age, 11 years old, and even like high school, to not really like have been a church goer, but still kind of have that faith in a higher power is guiding you in a direction that you can't necessarily understand at this moment. Why do you think you had that at that age?
again, I think I would go back to just it being an innate connection to our Father, to our Creator.
Yeah.
And I also just I always believed like things happen for a reason, and that reason just somehow, some way, maybe it was through some inputs that I don't even realize at this point that pointed me to God being that reason. But yeah, I think things happen for a reason, and God was that reason, kind of upstairs manipulating the strings, if you will, was kind of what I always believed. So I feel like that is where my faith derived. I had some friends throughout grade school and things like that who were into the church and things, but nothing that I really picked up for myself or anything of that nature.
I get that, but like still like to me, like, if I think of my 11-year-old self or my 17-year-old self, if that happened to me, like I grew up going to church. I've actually been doing a lot of like self-reflection lately. I grew up going to Catholic mass and got confirmed and all that stuff. But honestly, I don't think I was ever a believer, even going to church and all that stuff at the time. So again, those things happening could be an easy way for somebody to say like, oh, well, either there isn't a God, or like God is this guy or this being that is like doing bad things in my life. Like, why is this happening to me? Rather than, oh, this is something that is going to be putting me in a different direction than, again, what I originally thought, but I'm trusting in it rather than complaining or, again, saying, why me? Did you have any of that at all?
I think definitely as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
like throughout those high school years, because those are big years where you're trying to fit in, and that's really all you're focused on is fitting in and, you know, looking good. And so there's actually one monumental moment for me that I can think back to. It was, again, prepping up for that senior year baseball season. They they asked me, it was going to be senior night or whatever they do, where they announce all the seniors who are graduating, and this is their last year. And they asked me like, write down the family that's going to walk out with you. And I come from a small town, so I know everybody. I know the announcer. I know the guy who's asking me to write down my family members' names. He knows me. He knows my family. And I just wrote down Mitchell Moore, my brother's name, as you know, and I slid the paper back over to him because at this point, my parents had been divorced. My dad wasn't married at the time, but was in a pretty long term relationship. I think my mom was as well. My mom had since had my sister, half sister, of course. And so my family was just split. I kind of had two running families going on, the typical divorce thing. So I wrote down my brother and I slid the paper back across, and he was like, "That's it." And I was like, "Yeah, that's it." And so I think in terms of like this why me and maybe victim mentality perspective, it was looking around at other people's families and, just not fitting in because my parents were split, and I had two families and I had to go back and forth house to house, and my parents couldn't be in the same room, like where you see other parents like involved in doing things with their kid, like at as you're on sports teams, like fundraisers and stuff like that. But my parents never really did that stuff, which again, looking back, I'm extremely grateful for because it crafted an independence within me to have to go out and do these things on my own. And I think it's a piece as to why I've been able to accomplish what I've accomplished at a young age and just matured at a young age, having to grow up fast and having to be on my own and navigate these difficult situations without my parents really holding my hand because they had, they're all their own stuff going on. So I do think there was a bit of that kind of why me, but I quickly think I was able to just have a lens of gratitude and appreciation just for how I was growing, man, honestly.
No kind of growth like forced growth. Just survive,
Yeah.
survive in advance. What do you think most people get wrong about either God or Christianity, whatever kind of frame you want to take it in, that maybe aren't believers or have struggle believing? Because I'm sure you've talked to a bunch of guys within your community and without of either various levels of faith.
Yeah. Yeah, I think guys overcomplicate it. I'm sure women do as well. I'm not, too in tune with women's perspectives. I connect with men all day, every day. Um, so I think guys overcomplicate it. I think it's something in today's world that you're almost forced to have some sort of identity, and this world's going to attack that identity. So it's like you better be ready to defend it. And so what that leaves you with is I'm not going to pick up that Bible and even attempt to read it because I'm going to get attacked. What are you doing? What is that about? Can you answer XYZ question? What do you believe? What is this? What is that? So it's like I'm not even going to touch it, because if I try to touch it, the world's coming after that identity. And so I think that leads us in a insecure, almost fearful state to claim anything, to put a foot in the sand at all, and claim this is what we believe, or any sort of values. Because I think if you look around at men who have a desire to achieve something in life, let's say, have a pursuit of some sort of personal excellence, you can boil down their core values to the core values of Christianity very quickly with just a logical conversation that has no label on it, no Christian label, no nothing. And so it's like, you seem to be taking actions and living in alignment with the values that are in the Bible, but they don't want to pick it up because, again, then you have to cover. You better be able to answer every question if you get asked. And that's just not the truth. So I think that a lot of men that I've seen, they just like, I don't know how to pray. I don't know how to read that book. It's just like any other book. Like if you had Alex Hormozy's $100 million offers in front of you, you would open that thing up and say, oh, that's a pretty cool story. How can I apply that and improve my life? Same thing with the Bible. It's a couple thousand-year-old book that's created life change for trillions. Best-selling book ever. I think it's worth the read for anyone looking to grow and looking to build something, whether you say you're a Christian, a believer, or not. So I think that that's the biggest thing I've seen, man, is just people are on the starting blocks and they're so afraid of what everyone else is going to think or ask or say that they're afraid to even give the book a crack open and just see what it might have in store for their life. And I think you'd be surprised, because when you do that, you start to become a leader. Like you start to step up, live boldly, and lead the people around you. Because those people around you who are questioning you, like they're looking for something to cling to as well. We're all pursuing something with a backbone, something with a sustenance in today's world. Like there's so much artificial stuff out there, as we know. I mean, we can even say artificial intelligence, whatever. But I think people are looking for a truth and something of value to stand on and be backed by. And I think if you're willing to live boldly, open the Bible, give it a shot, I think God will really work in your life, show you some things that will, lead you to believe. And I think you'll begin to be a leader in the environment and community around you of all those people who you're worried about being judged by.
Yeah, just started reading it for the first time. When I maybe back in December is when I tweeted that, and tweeted out that, and got a bunch of advice on how to read it, because it can be a intimidating book to approach. How would you suggest people start if they are interested in opening it for the first time?
Yeah, honestly, I would say it depends on what level of commitment they're about to have. Like, how much time are you going to give me? So I think that if you're just looking to get into a habit of reading it and want stuff that's straightforward, I think Proverbs is an incredible place to start. It's going to be small, tangible, bite-sized, valuable tips, lessons there. Now, I think if you're genuinely, seeking truth, seeking questions and answers, something's been pulling on you, I would recommend reading the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, starting there. Just seeing Jesus come down as a man, God in the flesh as 100% God and 100% man. It's going to give you a sense of relatability to God, and that's what's going to start that relationship. God sent his son to die so that we can have a relationship with him. And and reading the stories and the accounts of Jesus is what's going to build that identity of who he was and build that relationship with him. So yeah, I think that those would be my two recommendations of starting points. Now, if you're someone who's gonna like commit to reading the whole Bible, I don't see why cover to cover, wouldn't work. You're gonna get the full picture of everything and whatnot. But most people, they're just looking to kind of taste test and see what's there.
I've read, I would say, most of the New Testament at this point, and like I said, I grew up going to church, not necessarily a believer or not, but it's funny to like, I thought I knew the story and like kind of did, but what I've learned about myself and just have now knowing myself, and I feel like a lot of people are kind of in my same bucket, is that again, you think you know the story, you think that you are, I don't know if smarter is the right word, but you think you know everything that goes into the life of Jesus and the story of God. And so like you're able to say like, oh, I'm not a believer because I already know the story, without actually doing the work to know the story. Because like I said, I never read the Bible until last year, but starting last year. But for the, the previous 25 years, I was like, oh, I know the story. I know whether I should believe or not. And so we get in these just false senses of confidence in ourselves, and that in itself, is a major, like, just part of the Bible. They are that confidence in ourselves and pride rather than confidence in God. It's been honestly a fascinating last 6 months, and for me, like, I needed to understand it intellectually to be able to believe it. And to your point of just like slow progress, I know I've gotten to that point, but it's taken a lot of time. And what I would say for a bunch of people, again, that are in my probably position that I was in for the first 30 years of my life, you have to do, like anything else, you have to do the work to actually have a true opinion on it, rather than something that you hear from somebody else or whatnot. And if you really want to get to the point of believing, you got to know what it is that is actually being told, rather than what other people tell you that is being told.
Yeah. I think to add to your point as well, something I mentioned earlier is just looking at your core values. Like your core values line up, with that of Christianity. And again, most people do. The conversations that I've had with non-believers, there's a lot of alignment there. And I think another thing as well that I would encourage anyone to look at who's trying to understand it from that intellectual standpoint, like you're saying, is you probably have a vision for your life. You want to, I'd imagine, a healthy, fit body. You want a family, like you want to build a business. You want to do these things. You have this vision for what you want to achieve. Me too. And I would just challenge anyone who has a vision, any entrepreneurial type mind, like, where do you think that vision came from? Like, was it just a craft of your environment? Well, then I would argue, how many inputs have you had against your vision rather than for your vision? Because I bet it's pretty skewed. I bet you had more people who were not entrepreneurs growing up around you that you took in from than you did people who were entrepreneurs. Most of us are lucky if we even have one that we can look up to growing up, somebody who's just going against the grain. So I think it's hard to say that our environment gave us this vision for a greater life. I think it's God. I think it's a vision from God. And I think it's that innate connection to our Father, to our Creator. I think it's the plan He has for our life. So that's been something that intellectually has given me a lot of confidence of just being like, okay, like these things that I'm doing, like there's just no way this was a programming of my environment. And I think without God, without that, that spiritual compass, that guidance from Him, that spirit within us, like I think we would all kind of be animalistic. We'd be reactionary. We'd be doing whatever the masses do because that's would be our most inputs. It'd be like a robot in a way.
Yeah, that's actually a fascinating point that I haven't really thought about along those lines.
Yeah. I think another thing is just like, what's the alternative too? Like that's something I kind of go back and forth with non-believers on. I'm like, okay, take a Christian, take a believer. Like we believe that we're gonna live our life based on this book and try to be a better man and ultimately try to become the best version of ourselves and live based on pretty good morals and values. And if we just have belief in Jesus as our Lord and Savior, like we'll get to live eternally in heaven in a perfect place that doesn't have these struggles and things like that. It's like, well, what's the alternative of not believing? Like that nothing's really happening for any reason, that struggles were not really meant for any good, that we just are kind of here under some bit of, I guess, anarchy, 80 to 100 years, whatever it might be. And then that's just it. Like, it just kind of seems like a pointless way of living. And I think that, honestly, I think you can see that, not to judge anyone because I'm not the judge here. I'm broken just like the next guy, but I feel like you can really see that when you meet with believers who have that on fire faith. I think you can see there's a point to living versus you meet with people who don't have that belief, don't have that faith. It's like they just kind of seem like they're floating, kind of on that autopilot. And I think that you're trying to lead men out of that and are leading men out of that and helping people to change that. And obviously that's what I'm aiming to do as well. So it's something where you can just kind of see, the belief becoming our identity in a way.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think there's a, again, however you want to frame it, religious revival, Christian revival going on? I always have a difficult time discerning between just like our bubble of Twitter and the internet that we're on, which I definitely think there is, definitely a lot of that going on, myself included. Doing what I'm doing now with, going to church every Sunday and join a Bible group every Wednesday and reading the Bible and so on and so forth. Like you would have told me, let's say 2 years ago, I'd be doing that. I would have told you you're crazy. So myself very much being part of it. And again, just like the bubble of Twitter that we are on, there's definitely, I would say, that kind of revival, a lot more people interested. Do you think that's a wider thing amongst the general population, or do you think it is kind of just in this little bubble at this point still?
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying as to just what we're consuming,
Mm-hmm.
getting deep into the content of Christians and seeing this movement. Personally, I believe the movement never stopped. I think the movement died or started, I should say, with Jesus dying and resurrecting. And I think that we see that in the book of Acts with the start of the church. And I think the movement's been carrying on. I think God never stopped working. I think that people have been putting their faith in Jesus ever since. And I think it's something for you and I to see a movement is exactly kind of what you're saying of like, we went from consuming almost like evil, let's say, good and evil, if we want to have that conversation of like, consuming the news and consuming from just anyone and everyone in media, anyone who's getting the attention, whether it's I don't know, Drake or Kanye or whatever, just like these popular names who are getting the attention. You just kind of let the media sway you, and then when you kind of put your foot in the sand and say, "No, these are my beliefs, these are my values," and you see that sanctification process happening in your heart, it's not as easy to listen to that music anymore. It's not as easy to consume that news anymore. It's not as easy to watch those shows anymore. So you start just like tuning your life to a different dial, and that dial is high quality inputs, people who see a light at the end of the tunnel, people who have faith, hope, belief. And when you do that and you're consuming nothing but that, it's like I can't help but to feel a movement and a revival happening. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing in both your and I's life. I think that I could relate to you on that front, absolutely, just kind of having come to the faith in the last few years now. So but as far as social media goes, like if you follow the right people, yeah, you'll feel on fire. You'll feel like there are millions of people just on Team God, just freaking going to war every day with the devil and evil and just fighting. So it's awesome feeling, and I think that that's what we've seen just within our community of Elevate, 200 men spanning across the world. Like, you feel that. And not only do you feel that just from a worldly sense, you get to feed off of it every day and make the connections from a one-on-one standpoint. So yeah, man, I'm with you. I do feel a movement, but I also think the movement is just momentum that's been carried for thousands of years now.
To that point of like good and evil, but back to like the media and the things that you consume, do you think it's intentional? Type of music, TV, news, like, is it created by evil to take us away from good, from God, to distract us from what is in our heart? How do you just think about that?
I definitely believe there's a spiritual warfare happening in and around us that we maybe can't see, but I think the Bible, points to it. And I can think about my personal experience. I started watching porn when I was 11 years old, struggled with a porn addiction for nearly a decade. And it was something where I didn't think anything of it as I was objectifying women and just doing everything I could, just to score at the end of the night. Like, I didn't really think of my actions as bad, but I genuinely believe, like, I genuinely believe I was like possessed by a demon. Like, and that's crazy. People are gonna be like, "Wow, did he really just say that?" But if you go look at the Bible, like, it's Jesus is casting out demons as he's here on earth. People are coming up to him with this evil spirit inside of them, and he's casting this evil spirit out, casting these demons out. So I think if I'm going to take the Bible as my truth, how can I take all the good, all the hope, all the love, and all the grace, and not also have an understanding for the evil in this world, and understanding that I need to be on guard and watchful, and using the sword of the spirit, and surrounded by community to fight against that evil. So I think we'd be very ignorant to take the Bible and just say, "Oh, it's all sunshine and rainbows over here." Definitely think there's an evil at work. And yeah, I mean, my personal experience just with porn alone and that standpoint, objectifying women and lust and all that, it's been something where, I've had to work so hard for many years now to just rewrite my thoughts, reprogram my thoughts, and ultimately get just filled with the Holy Spirit versus those evil dwellings.
And how does someone go about that? Is that just reading the Bible, praying, going to church, abstaining from whatever your vice is, porn or drugs or alcohol or whatever that addiction may be that you're trying to get rid of?
Yeah, I think to give people an objective like formula, let's say something that's really helped me is looking at inputs. It's something where at 10 years old I was rapping Lil Wayne, and it's not really the best for a 10-year-old, and it's not best for me at 21 either. Like, genuinely. So yeah, I could say I have discernment now, but it's still programming your thoughts. It's still altering the way you think and see the world. So I think just looking at that standpoint, I encourage guys or women, I guess, too, to look back and look at how much you've consumed of this world, of worldly inputs, of sex and drugs and porn or whatever it is, of negative inputs. And then that hopefully puts you on a war path to ruthlessly consume an equal and greater amount of inputs that goes against those negative ones. And that's pretty much what I have done. So I think from a mechanism standpoint, let's say it's not just one thing. I think it's a culmination of everything that's refining you and building an identity. I think it's the people you surround yourself with, the TV you watch, the music you listen to, the thoughts you have. 90% of our thoughts are recurring on a day-to-day basis. So it's like that's pretty wild to consider that you're just getting programmed by your own thoughts every single day to what's normal, to what's comfortable, to what's truth. And it's like if you don't do anything to break up those patterns and interrupt those thoughts, like, you're gonna get stuck in ruts. You're gonna feel complacent. You're gonna feel empty and lacking purpose and unfulfilled. So again, I think it's a culmination of everything. The actions you take, people, places, things. And I think that's why we can see moving out of the hometown being such a recipe for success. It's simply a change in environment. Like, you understand this probably better than anyone. You went down to South America, I know, and did a little world tour from what I understand down there. And I just imagine, I think you spent time in Argentina.
Yep.
Is that right? So I just imagine when we drop Nick off in Argentina, those 90% of recurring thoughts gone, because you have to make every thought brand new. The guy at the grocery store doesn't even speak the same language as you. You can't go robotically walk to the grocery store and shop. You have to intentionally and actively think about every single action you're taking. And so if people have grown up in the same place, they've never been put in new environments, kind of like that forced growth that you've touched on earlier. It's like you're just going to stay in that monotonous rut of those negative inputs that are just programming you against, I feel, what God has for you.
Yeah, no, you were spot on about that experience as a whole. Like, one, just like perspective shifting and thinking that the world that I knew, that I grew up, is completely different, of course, from a completely different continent, and just the way we live here in America. And I lived 27 of my 28 years at that point within Pennsylvania itself. So seeing just that the world is different puts you in a different perspective. But then, to your point of having to be more alert and just more intentional about everything you're doing, just because even if you're not necessarily trying it, your subconscious is doing it because it's not lulled to sleep by, like, oh, I know this store, I know this street. And so how many times do people like just drive to work without even like realizing they drive to work? They're just to that autopilot. But whenever you're in a new environment, new place, it snaps you out of that, and you have to be just more alert on a, again, subconscious level, even if it's nothing that you're consciously thinking about. Which, to your point of people drifting, once people get into adulthood, get that kind of first job, and just get into that routine of life, that's when it really kind of starts to become easy to drift and get lulled into the quote unquote normal life of just doing things that you might not necessarily want to be doing, but it's comfortable. And again, you're just repeating those same thoughts day in, day out. So why shake things up? And that leads to a life of lesser than what could be, which is maybe the saddest life that is.
Absolutely, man. I think something that people don't consider with environment as well is digital environment, like we've talked about with social media too. Like, I think about it from a physical environment, relationships, and then digital as well. You really got to audit all three. Like, if someone's listening to this and they're like, man, I want to change something, I want to change an identity, I just encourage you to rearrange your freaking place. If that's where you got to start, maybe it's not like Nick dropped off in Argentina, maybe it's not jumping across the country. Rearrange your place. Like, take everything in your physical environment and say, does this point me forward? If the answer is no, then get rid of it. Get rid of everything. And that's why I think the minimalist, lifestyle is so appealing for people who are very driven, is because clutter does not point anyone forward. Little things do, minimalist stuff does. So that's where I'd start. Literally in the physical environment. Does this notebook point me forward? Is this something that I've just had? Is this, I don't know, whatever it is, furniture, get rid of it. Artwork on the walls, get rid of it. Like, every single thing should point you forward.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you brought up digital, because if you really think about it, especially younger age, we talk about real life and digital life, where for a lot of people now, digital life is real life. You spend 6 to 8 hours on a screen, you're committing most of your awake time to being online. And whether that's a good thing or bad thing is a completely separate conversation that we could talk an hour about itself. But if you're going to be online for 6 to 8 hours, you better be extremely specific about who you're following, the type of content you're looking at, and trying to think about how this is, one, just making me think and act in, again, my quote unquote real life, but is it forcing me, or not forcing, but creating an environment that makes me want to get better? Because the simple adage of you are the 5 people you surround yourself with, you are the 100 people that you follow, or 1,000 people that you follow. And so it's easy to get sucked in the trap of whatever you want to call it, just bullshitting about politics, life in general, blah, 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 whenever that's what you follow. But, and especially if you're spending, again, even if it's 3 to 4 hours online, like that's a fifth of your day, waking hours. And so to be extremely intentional and audit your online personalities, maybe even more important than your in-person life nowadays.
I think it's a reason, honestly, one of the many reasons I'm so bullish on community is what you can do with your social media following, which is a community. People that follow you, the people you follow, it's a type of community. Now, are you building one-on-one relationships and connecting? Maybe not, but you're probably building a parasocial relationship with the person that you're following. Parasocial meaning, you know them, you feel like you know them at least, and they have no idea who you are. Kind of a scary relationship when you really take a step back. But what is so unique about it is you can take a guy who's 22 years old making 7 figures a month and be like, oh my God, like that just shattered your entire perspective of what's possible in life. And it's like, if you can just get it in enough rooms like that, if you can just get enough friends like that, if you can just be around that and watch that rub off on you every chance you get by surrounding yourself with it. You're saying 5 people you surround yourself with. Absolutely. That's why I built this community, because I wanted guys who were pursuing personal excellence. It's like, I need them around me in every sense of the word. So when I wake up, I really don't have a choice but to grow, because I have to go talk to my community of 200 men who are pushing, dudes who wake up long before I do and crush workouts. It's kind of a running joke in the community that Peyton eats miles for breakfast, because he'll just have 10 miles crushed before you even got out of bed. And you're like, oh my God. So you just, you get pushed. But it's just crazy how people surrounding you, and especially like-minded people, can shatter everything that you thought was true about the way the world works if you just surround yourself with them for long enough. And I've been fortunate enough to do that, to surround myself with guys that, millionaires under 25. And it's just like, oh my God, I'm not even close to what I could be doing. I got to be doing more. Not necessarily from a monetary standpoint. That's just the easiest objective one to look at on paper. From an impact standpoint, you see guys that I'm friends with host events that bring together thousands of people. It's like, I could be doing more. Like, look at this. It just, you have this circle and it's influencing you every single day. It's creating what's possible, what's reality in your mind. And it's vital. It truly is. And I know we're just kind of beating a dead horse here, but it's worth beating if it gets it across to someone to change their environment in every aspect.
Absolutely, man. Peer pressure can be either the worst thing for you or the best thing for you, depending on who you surround yourself with. But Matt, I really appreciate you, brother. And I think what you're doing with Elevate is amazing. And you said you're at 200 guys now. It's not going to be long till you hit 500,000 people. And it's really inspiring to watch. And so I want to end here with the final question that I ask everybody, which is, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
Man, what hit my mind is just because this is what God placed me here to do, honestly. And I think that's genuinely the answer. When I was transforming what I would say was my identity, biggest transformation I made up until this point, kind of my slogan during that time was, God placed me here intentionally, so I will live intentionally. I've just been given gifts, man, that I feel undeserving of. Through God's grace, I'm able to use them and walk in them every day. But I've been given gifts, And one of those gifts is Jesus dying on the cross so that I can live. Other of those gifts is the ability to connect and cultivate relationships and build community and empower others. And it's like I just refuse to not fulfill that. Refuse to be given gifts from God and not use them for God to glorify Him and see all the good that can be used. So I think that's a little bit long winded there, but that's what hit my mind, man. Is like there's really no other option, honestly.
I love it, man. And if people are inspired by the conversation and want to connect with you or learn more about Elevate, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, definitely Twitter, Matt S. Moore _ If you're like, I'm ready to jump in this community, you go straight to the website, elvtlife.com. Punch that up and it'll pull you straight to our site. We got a free devotional on there. So maybe you're a guy who's thinking about getting into faith and just wants something that's bite-sized. It's 30 days, very small scripture, very small bite-sized actions that you can take to maybe build a snowball of momentum that ends up to you putting your faith in God. So check that out if you want. But all in all, just hope somebody was inspired by this and goes to carry a cross for themselves.
Awesome. I'll have that link in the show notes. People easily find you. But Matt, appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate you, man. We'll have to do it again.
Yes, sir.